Hey there everyone, this is Mystic Fish and welcome to what I'm going to call episode 22.5 of our Factorio series on building expandable megabase. We are looking at an updated version of the lab. So last episode we designed our lab array to consume our 1350 signs per minute, and I got a couple of suggestions from folks in the comments about sort of alternatives. And one of them came from the user's second engineer, who suggested that we could do things with Sushi Belts and cram a lot more labs into the same area of beacons. And so that is what we're looking at here. If we take a look at the new array, and I'll walk you through it in a minute, but if we take a look at the new array, we can see this uses 250 speed modules versus the one we had designed last episode, which uses 420. So this is a significant reduction in the number of beacons, which means it will be much easier to upgrade to this point. So let's talk a little bit about how this works. There's some fun features involved here. I am noticing that we're missing a RoboPort, so let's get one in there. Okay, so here's how I think the science is going to be coming in. I'm currently researching mining productivity, which if we take a look at it, does not use military science or black science, right? So, but we can see the rest of the science streaming right in. And let's see. So total amount of belts that we're using here is really 3.5, right? Because we have 7 sciences and we have a half blue belt of each. So we can't put all of the science onto a single belt. So we're going to end up needing just 4 sushi belts to get the full throughput. So the first thing we do is for each belt of science, we split it into 4 equal belts. So here's our single half belt. We're splitting that in fourths. And we're doing that for each of the science belts here. Then we have a fun little mass of spaghetti to actually sort things out so that we end up with one belt of each of the quarter science belts. I guess that's what we would describe this. So these are 4 sets of belts that are the same. Then we have some fun sushi logic, and I'll explain what's going on here. So, one thing to look at is, so look at these 4 belts, and you can see the green light is kind of cycling through these 4 belts. And so the belts are enabled in a specific sequence, and they're enabled for to let each belt through at a certain time. Then we've got splitters that actually combine them onto the single belt. And so I'll explain the circuit logic here in a second, but let's take a look at the result, right? The result is that we get a nice little compressed belt here, and you can see the sciences are just coming in little waves here, and there is a gap, right? Because we only have 7 sciences and not 8, so there's a gap where the 8th science would be. So this is actually working pretty well to produce the sushi belts, and so basically what we have here is each of these belts is 7/8 full. Which is what we would expect, right, from sort of sorting out the 3.5 belts up here, which are 7. We're using 7 of the 8 total half belts up here, and so it makes sense that we're getting 7/8 full here. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the logic here. So let's look at a blue belt. express transport belt produces or can transport 45 items per second. So it's down there at the bottom of this little dialogue, 45 items per second. Now that's for both sides of the belt. And so what I decided was I actually wanted to put, there's actually 6, each little batch here, there's 6 science in each of these batches. And I did that but just sort of observing how this was working. We can kind of see it here is when the labs actually grab science, they're able to, the stack inserters are able to grab sort of 6 in a row and stuff them in, and that seemed to be a good balance as far as being able to keep the sciences well stacked here. So that's why I decided to go with 6, right? That's basically a half stack, right? The stack inserter can do 12 at a shot. I decided 6 would work out okay. And so then the math is we want 6 in a batch. And we want to divide by 45 items per second, but we're really only looking at a half belt, so we have to multiply by 2. And so that gives us this number of seconds. That's how many seconds we want each one of these to be active, each one of these belts to be active. So then we multiply this by 60, and that gives us 16 ticks. So basically, because there are 60 ticks in a second. So each of these belts is active for exactly 16 ticks. So the way that we do that is we have a little clock here. So we've got, we're counting ticks. So we have just a single 1 of the T that comes into the input of this arithmetic combinator, which has a loop back. So this will start counting up. And we use mod 64. So if we have 4 phases that are 16 ticks each, the entire cycle is 64. Then we have combinators that control each of these belts separately. This combinator doesn't do anything. It's actually just based on the raw clock signal. But we have to put this in there so that we have the same number of ticks of delay of the logic, so that these are all tick aligned, as I guess tick synchronized is the way to think about it. All of their outputs show up at the same time based on the input. So then the next one is we want this one to be delayed by 16 ticks. So because we want it to go after this one, right? This one's active, then this one becomes active. And so another way of thinking about that is we can delay this by 16 ticks if we subtract 16 from the base clock, right? That's basically makes this clock run 16 ticks slower is the way to think about it. Now, because we're doing modular arithmetic, what we do is we're in modulo 64. So minus 16 is the same as 64 minus 16. 16, right? Which is 48. So when we're doing mod 64, adding 48 is exactly the same as subtracting 16. So that's why we're adding 48 here. So this output here goes to the input. So the clock output goes to the inputs of each of these combinators. And then on a red wire. And then we've got a green wire to this input that subtracts 16. You're also mod 64, but you get the output signal 2. The next one down needs to be delayed by 32 ticks from the first one, so that's actually the same as adding 32. It's exactly half. And then the fourth one is 48 ticks delayed, which is, so minus 48 and positive 16 are the same when we do mod 64. Then if we just come over here, what we do is we're looking signal 1 is less than 16, signal 2 is less than 16, etc. And so that is how we get this sort of 16 tick delay cycle working here. And then we just connect the same control wire that's red here for the first belt to the first belt to the first belt to the first belt, and the second belt to the second belt to the second belt to the second belt, and that way we only need one copy of the logic. And these all stay synchronized. Whew! Okay, so that is how we accomplish the sushi. So now we can talk about what we do here. So, at a high level, what happens is each sushi belt comes in on one side of the labs and loops around to the other side of the labs. And labs have inserters on both sides, so we're really giving them as much opportunity as possible to consume all the science. I will say that I found that there's actually 88 labs in here. We had calculated we only need 83. I found just adding a couple more made it more likely that we would consume more of the science as it goes. But if you watch, what happens, I think, just due to the natural variations of things, is that occasionally we get science coming through here, like those two greens that just went by, right? Like they were leftovers. They didn't get grabbed by anybody. I mean, those did. Then what we do for the second set of labs is here's a fresh sushi belt. We're going to combine it with the leftovers, but we're going to give preference to the fresh sushi belt, right? So the input priority is to the left. And then output priority here on the right. Now, if you look, the gap is only on one side here. So that is why we've introduced a lane balance here. So we put the leftovers kind of on both sides so that there's a chance to weave them in. Most of the leftovers here are black science, as we would expect, because we're not using the black science, so all the black science should be coming through. And you can see that they get packed into that gap at least a little bit. Okay, for the third set of labs, they just get a plain fresh sushi belt. Any leftovers continue down here. The leftovers of the third, we do the same thing. We do a lane balancer here. We combine it with a fresh sushi belt. This chain of splitters basically does the same thing. It says, okay, we're going to give preference to the fresh sushi belt, and any of the leftovers, we'll give them a bunch of chances to try to get packed into that extra spot there. I did play around with just continuing to add the leftovers more and more, but I found that I ended up getting a little bit of clogging. So it's really, the leftovers from the first one can go into the second one, but then the third one gets a fresh sushi belt. And so anyway, then the leftovers come out here. We can see that most of what we have here are the black science, as we can expect, but there are, occasional bits of science that didn't get picked up anywhere. Now, because we were trying to cram things in as much as possible, like we can kind of see that this top belt, right, which has had the most attempted consolidation, I think kind of has the most stuff on it, right? There's almost nothing on this belt left over. So we have a little bit of imbalance here. And so I just put a balancer in here to spread all the leftovers out across the 4 belts. And then what we have to do is we have to sort the leftovers. And so in each case, we filter out one of the sciences with splitters from the 4 belts. We put them together, and then we have a lane balancer here that will spit the leftovers out here. If we want to see it in action, I guess most of our leftovers here are the black science. And what we would hope, and what in fact we see, is with the black science, we can see that we're getting a compressed belt of black science out. Which is actually what we're putting into the system here, right? You can see it here. We've got a compressed belt of black science coming in. And then when we sort this all out, it means that we're compressed coming out. And that's important because otherwise this whole thing might clog. And I'll show an example of this anyway. But then, the remnants come through here. We have ordered the filters in a way. So for example, here, the green science is the last thing. So we don't need filters for it, splitters for it. But here's the red science. And then they each have a lane balancer, and then they get put together onto one belt, which is arranged in the same orientation as the input belt here. And so then it gets fed back into the system. Any leftovers get used, and we have input priorities set on those. And so those, let's see, here's some yellow ones coming in. And so those yellow ones get consumed and put on the belt, and that just temporarily backs up the raw input from the science production. So that way we're making sure we are eventually consuming everything. But we can see it does a pretty good job. There's really not much left over here. And, if we go take a look at the production graph, we're clearly right around the 1350. We don't have enough significant digits here to fully see it, but I did see that flash up to 1.4 occasionally, which suggests to me that we're, between 1300, 1400, something like that. So I think this is consuming basically what we're looking for. And it's got the fun of a sushi belt, and it's got way fewer speed modules, which is a good deal. Okay, so then the other thing that I did check to test is if I turned off, this was the other stress test that I did. So let's turn off research. Okay, so the labs are going to stop labbing, and now all of this input is going to come out as leftovers when it works its way through. And we really want to make sure that that the flow is smooth through the whole thing, so that this doesn't back up. Because if it backs up, we won't be able to smoothly sort of insert the sushi with the right frequency in here. So it's gonna take a little bit. No, I guess here it comes. So we got a lot more leftovers over here. We can see that, now we have nearly full belts. There are gaps in there, right? I guess if we turn on our transport level, where's the gaps? Transport line gaps. Turn that guy on. We can see there are some white lines in here where it's gaps, which makes sense, right? These should all be 7/8 full. Okay, so let's turn this back off. Actually, let's leave it on. Okay, so now we're starting to get sorted here. And the main thing that we want to see is that there are, once this gets going, there are no gaps up here. Because that means that we are, we should be smoothly putting all of the remnants, if what we had was a compressed belt coming in, then by the time we come back around here to recycle it, we really want to see a compressed belt on this side too. And I think we get there if we will just wait for it. The main thing to look at is if we come down here, we should not see any hitches in any of these belts, right? These belts should all be moving in parallel if this is working properly. And so let's come up here. Let's take a look. As we can, this is the tricky part, right? Is the black science. There was already a lot of black science on here. And so when it doesn't get used, these back up a little bit. But I believe if we've done the math, it should be able to keep up without. No, see, we've got some backing up going on here, which I think it is ultimately okay because we have this balancer here. This balancer, you can see down here, you can see it. You can see some of the backups happening occasionally here. There'll be a stutter because one of the sorting out filters has backed up. But because we do have gaps in here, and this is a throughput unlimited balancer, it does mean that this can all still flow through here. And the math should work out that these should be able to keep up, right? And yeah, actually, we actually managed to drain our backlog of the black science at this point. And we are gap free up here. So we got compressed belts coming out. So that means this is nice because it means that if we forget to do research, we're not going to gum up the works here. It means if we're doing research that doesn't use some of the science we have on the belt, it's not going to gum up the works. I mean, we already saw that working with the mining productivity research. So I think this is pretty fun. This was a fun little challenge to work out how to do. I'm pretty happy that we got it working, and I'm going to include the blueprints. I'm going to leave the old ones in when I publish them. I think I'm going to use the sushi one here when we do the playthrough, just because it does have a reduced number of beacons. There is a trade-off, right? Which is that if we turn the research back on, the trade-off that we get here, right, is that like there are some leftovers that do come through here. I can turn off my gaps now. Where are those? Here are those. There are some leftovers that the labs don't consume. There's not very many of them, but there's some. And you know, I don't know. I guess it depends how much of a purist you want to be. If you would like to be a purist and say, no, I need to absolutely consume all of the science, then, you know, this will do it, right? This will do it because all of the science comes through here, it will eventually back up here, and all of the labs will eventually consume all of the science. So these will absolutely consume all of the science that we produce at some point, especially with an extra lab in here, which one of our commenters noted that like, you only need 83, but we put 84. But with an extra one, we will definitely consume absolutely all of the science. Here, you know, we're almost consuming all the science. I mean, it's pretty good. It's pretty good, right? Like, there's only handfuls of stuff that's coming out of here. I'm okay with it. I think the faster upgrade path is what I want to optimize for. But it's a good example of, you know, there's no perfect design. There's only trade-offs. And so, you know, every design has its pros and its cons, and it's just a matter of understanding what those are and then choosing a set that work out for what you want. So in my case, I'm going to optimize for easier upgrade ability at the expense of, you know, not being a purist about getting all the full 1350. This is close enough for me. If it's not close enough for you, then great, you can do that with the other designs. So that's the fun part of engineering, just in general. We should just make sure that we have got our RoboPorts placed properly so that they can connect to all the surrounding cells, which they can. Okay, and these do provide full construction coverage. Okay, so that is fine. All right, so I'm going to take blueprints. I'll produce the downgraded versions of these, and we'll put them in the blueprint book. So that was a fun half episode. I don't know. It just felt like a continuation, sort of like an appendix to the last episode. So I'll call it episode 22.5. But we still do have some problems left for future Mystic Fish. We're not quite done with the designs, but we are getting close. So we will indeed leave those as problems for future Mystic Fish. So in the meantime, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. And until then, bye.